My name is Elizabeth, and I remember the exact moment something inside me cracked. It wasn't the surgery, not the slow, aching recovery, not even the helplessness of needing assistance to do the simplest things. No, it was a sentence I was never meant to hear. She's not worth that kind of money. The words drifted in from a hallway, quiet but sharp enough to cut straight through me. I froze, halfway through a breathing exercise, staring at the ceiling as if it could somehow explain what I had just heard. At first, I thought I misunderstood, but then her voice came again, calm, irritated, unmistakably hers. My daughter. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe properly. Something in me knew that if I made the slightest sound, I would lose access to a truth that had already begun unraveling everything I believed about my life. She barely improves. It's just a waste. There was a pause, like she was listening to whoever was on the other end. Then a quiet laugh, cold, detached. I mean, honestly, how long can this even go on? My chest tightened. I lay there, silent, as if I had already become exactly what she described. Invisible, irrelevant, something to be managed rather than loved. The irony was almost cruel. The therapy sessions were fully covered. I had checked it myself. Every form, every statement. There was no burden, no financial strain, which meant she was lying.
But why?
That question echoed louder than anything else. Why would my own daughter pretend I was a problem and expense something temporary? I kept my eyes closed when she walked into the room a minute later. Her tone had changed completely.
Warm. Sweet.
Gentle. Mom, how are you feeling today? I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I opened my eyes slowly and gave her the same polite smile I had worn for weeks.
I'm all right.
She nodded, satisfied, as if checking off a task on a list. Everything about her looked normal. Perfect, even. Her hair neatly tied back, her posture confident, her voice controlled. Anyone would think she was devoted. Anyone except me. Because now I had heard the truth behind the performance. And once you hear something like that, you can't unhear it. That night, I didn't sleep.
Not really.
I lay awake, staring into the dark, replaying every moment of the past weeks. Every time she insisted on handling something for me. Every time she answered my phone. Every time she told someone, she's resting, she's not up for talking. At the time, I had felt grateful. Now, it felt like something else entirely. Like I had been slowly, carefully placed into a smaller and smaller version of my own life. A version where I didn't question anything. Where I didn't notice. Where I didn't matter. The thought made my stomach turn. I had spent my entire life building independence. Working, saving, planning. Making sure I would never be a burden to anyone. Especially not to her. And yet here I was. Lying in my own house, in a bed I didn't choose, being quietly rewritten into someone weak, confused, disposable.
No.
Something was wrong. Deeply wrong. And for the first time since my surgery, I felt something stronger than pain or exhaustion. I felt clarity. The next morning, I did something small, but it changed everything. I got up on my own. It wasn't easy. My body protested with every step, my balance uncertain, my movement slow. But I didn't call her. I didn't wait. I walked. Each step felt like reclaiming something. By the time I reached the front door, I was breathing heavily, but I didn't stop. I opened it. The air outside felt different. Sharper.
Real.
And then I saw it. The mailbox. It had been weeks since I checked it myself. She had insisted on doing it to help. I reached it slowly, gripping the edge for support, and opened it. Inside were envelopes, bills, advertisements, letters. Normal things. Ordinary things. Things that suddenly felt suspicious. I took them all. Back inside, I spread everything across the table. My hands trembled. Not from weakness, but from something deeper. Instinct. The kind that whispers, "Look closer." I opened the first envelope. Then another. Then another. And then I found it. A statement.
Clear.
Simple. Impossible to misinterpret. Amount charged, $200. Amount covered, $200. Amount owed, $0.
I stared at it for a long time.
So I hadn't imagined it. She had lied. Not just exaggerated. Not misunderstood.
Lit.
I leaned back in my chair slowly, the paper still in my hands. A strange calm settled over me. Because this wasn't just about money. This was about something much bigger. Something deliberate. Something planned. I didn't know exactly what it was yet, but I could feel it, like standing at the edge of something dark and realizing the ground beneath you isn't as solid as you thought. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid. I was ready. I didn't confront her right away. That would have been the old me, direct, trusting, believing that honesty alone could fix anything. But something had shifted inside me overnight. I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was alert. And alert people don't rush. They observe. So I stayed quiet. When she came home later that morning, she greeted me with the same careful warmth, placing a cup of tea in front of me like she always did, asking the same questions, watching me just a little too closely. "How are you feeling today?" "Better," I said, meeting her eyes just long enough to let her think everything was normal. She smiled. That same smile.
Polished.
Controlled. Empty. And I realized something that made my stomach tighten. She wasn't just lying to other people. She was performing for me too. The rest of the day passed in silence, but not the peaceful kind. It was the kind filled with invisible tension, like something waiting to snap. I started paying attention to details I had ignored before. The way she kept her phone angled away from me. The way she answered calls in another room. The way she checked on me not with concern but with calculation. As if she wasn't asking how I felt, but how I functioned. That difference matters more than people think. The real shift came that afternoon. My phone rang. It startled me, not because it was loud, but because it felt unusual. I hadn't been receiving many calls lately. Before I could reach it, she appeared. "I'll get it," she said quickly. Too quickly. I watched her pick up the phone, glance at the screen, and then hesitate for just a fraction of a second. That was all it took. "Hello," she answered, her voice instantly soft.
Pause.
"Oh, she's resting right now." Another pause. "Yes, she's been very confused lately. The doctor says it's part of recovery." My chest went cold.
Confused.
She said it so easily, like it was fact, like it had always been true. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just listened. "No, I don't think visitors are a good idea right now, yes. I'll tell her you called." She hung up,
Turned. And smiled at me.
"It was nothing important," she said. I nodded slowly, but something inside me had already locked into place. This wasn't just manipulation. This was strategy. That evening, after she went to bed, I sat alone in the dim light of the living room, replaying everything again. The lies about money, the lies about my health, the control over my communication, the isolation. Piece by piece, it formed a pattern. And patterns don't lie. People do. The next morning, I decided to push a little further.
Carefully.
"I was thinking," I said over breakfast, keeping my tone light, "maybe I should call my sister today. It's been a while." There it was again. That flicker. Quick but undeniable. "Oh, she actually called a few days ago," my daughter replied, stirring her coffee without looking at me. "You didn't remember? You spoke to her already." I held her gaze. "I did. Yes," she said smoothly. "You were a bit tired, but you talked." Silence stretched between us. Then I smiled. "Of course. I must have forgotten." And just like that, I confirmed it. She wasn't just controlling my world. She was rewriting it. Later that day, I made another move. Small. Quiet. But important. While she was in the shower, I took my phone and stepped outside. My hands trembled as I dialed a number I knew by heart. It rang once.
Twice.
Then Elizabeth. My sister's voice.
Clear.
Immediate. Real. I closed my eyes for a second. Hi, I said softly. There was a pause. Then confusion. Is everything okay? I've been trying to reach you for weeks.
Weeks.
Not days.
Weeks.
My throat tightened, but I kept my voice steady. I know, I said. I think something hasn't been right. Another pause. What do you mean? I looked back at the house. At the windows. At the life I thought I understood. And for the first time, I said it out loud. I think I've been kept away from people. Silence. Then her voice changed, sharper now. What's going on, Elizabeth? I don't know yet, I admitted. But I'm going to find out. When I went back inside, everything looked the same, but it felt different. Because now I knew I wasn't imagining things. And more importantly, I wasn't alone. That night, I didn't feel like a patient.
I didn't feel weak.
I didn't feel dependent. I felt awake. And that's dangerous. Not for me. For her. Because the version of me she had been building, the quiet, confused, obedient version, was disappearing. And something else was taking its place. Something she hadn't planned for. Something she couldn't control. I lay in bed, staring into the darkness again. But this time, my thoughts were sharper, clearer, focused. If she was lying about this much, then what else had she done? What else had she changed, hidden, or taken? The question settled heavily in my mind, and I already knew the answer, more than I wanted to imagine. The next step was obvious. I needed proof, not feelings, not suspicions.
Proof.
Because whatever this was, it wasn't going to end with a conversation. And deep down, I think I already knew that. I closed my eyes slowly, and for the first time since everything began, I wasn't trying to understand her anymore. I was preparing. The moment you stop doubting yourself, everything changes. Not all at once. Not dramatically. But quietly, like a switch flipping somewhere deep inside you. The fear doesn't disappear, but it loses control. And in its place comes something far more dangerous. Focus. That's exactly what I felt the next morning. I didn't wake up confused. I didn't wake up hurt. I woke up strategic. Because now I understood something I hadn't before. This wasn't emotional anymore. This was calculated. And if I wanted to protect myself, I needed to think the same way. She left early that day. Said she had work. Important meetings. Deadlines. I nodded, played my role, watched her leave like I always did. But the moment the door closed, I moved. Not fast. Not carelessly. Every step was measured, controlled, deliberate. Because I didn't know how far this went. And I wasn't going to underestimate her again. The first place I went wasn't obvious. Not her room. Not her things. The kitchen. Because control doesn't start with big actions, it starts with habits. And habits leave traces. I opened drawers slowly, scanning everything. Bills. Notes.
Calendars.
Small pieces of information that people don't think matter. But they do. They always do. That's when I noticed it. A notebook. Simple. Neutral. Almost invisible among everything else. I opened it. At first glance, it looked normal. Schedules, reminders, grocery lists. Then I turned the page. And everything changed. My name. Written neatly at the top. Below it, bullet points.
Dates. Notes.
Observations. She seemed disoriented this morning. Repeated question twice. Forgot conversation from yesterday. My hand tightened around the page. This wasn't memory. This wasn't concern. This was documentation. Carefully written. Consistent. Intentional. She wasn't just telling people I was confused. She was building evidence. A cold realization spread through me. This wasn't about helping me. This wasn't even about control alone. This was preparation. For something legal.
Something permanent.
I kept turning pages. 'Each one worse than the last. She resisted assistance. 'Unforgettable. 'Unfit. 'Unfit. 'Unforgettable. 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 'Unfit Uncooperative behavior. possible safety risk when alone. It was like reading a report about a stranger, a version of me that didn't exist, a version she was creating. And suddenly everything made sense. The isolation, the lies, the phone calls, the controlled environment. She wasn't reacting to my condition. She was constructing it. I closed the notebook slowly, my mind racing. There was only one reason someone would do this.
Power.
Legal power. The kind you get when someone is declared incapable of managing their own life. Guardianship. The word hit me like a physical force. Because once that happens, you lose everything. Your decisions, your freedom, your voice. I stepped back, my breathing uneven now. For a moment, I felt it again. That wave of fear, heavy and suffocating. Because this wasn't just suspicion anymore. This was real. And she had already started. But then something else followed. Stronger.
Clearer.
Anger. Not loud. Not explosive.
Cold. Precise.
The kind that sharpens you instead of breaking you. Because she had made one mistake. A big one. She assumed I wouldn't notice. I moved to the next step. Her room. Everything inside was perfectly organized. Too perfect. Clothes aligned. Documents stacked.
No chaos. No randomness.
Just control. I went straight to the desk. Opened the first drawer. Nothing.
Second.
Nothing. Third. A folder.
Thin.
But heavy in meaning. I opened it. Applications. Printed. Filled out. Facilities. Places I had never seen. Never agreed to. Never even discussed properly. And yet, my name was on every page. My information. My signature. Forged. Perfectly copied. My heart didn't race this time. It slowed. Because now I knew exactly what I was dealing with. She wasn't waiting for me to agree. She was preparing to move me. Legally. Quietly. Irreversibly. I flipped through more pages.
Costs.
Comparisons. Notes written in the margins. Affordable. Available soon. Best option.
Best.
Option. For who? I sat down slowly, the folder still in my hands. And for the first time, I allowed myself to fully see it. Not just pieces. The whole picture. She isolates me. Controls communication. Spreads doubt about my mental state. Documents false behavior. Prepares legal narrative. Applies for placement. Waits for the right moment. It was almost impressive. If it wasn't my life she was dismantling. I stood up. Carefully placed everything back exactly as it was. Because now, more than ever, I understood something critical. She couldn't know that I knew. Not yet. The advantage was mine. But only if I kept it. I returned to the living room, sat down, and forced myself to breathe normally. Think clearly.
No panic. No impulsive decisions.
Because this wasn't over. Not even close. If she was building a case, then I needed to destroy it. Not emotionally. Not by arguing. But with something stronger.
Truth.
Evidence. Witnesses. And suddenly I knew exactly where to start. I reached for my phone. Not to call her. Not to confront. But to rebuild something she had taken from me. Connections.
People. Reality.
Because if she wanted to prove I was alone, I was going to prove the opposite. The call rang.
Once. Twice.
Then, Elizabeth. A familiar voice. Concerned.
Real.
And this time, I didn't hesitate. I need your help. The moment you decide to fight back, the world doesn't suddenly become easier. It becomes clearer. And clarity can be terrifying. Because now there's no comfort left in doubt. No soft illusion to hide behind. Just truth, sharp and undeniable. That's where I was now. I had proof. Not everything, not enough yet, but enough to understand the direction of what was happening. Enough to know that if I didn't act soon, I might lose the ability to act at all. And that thought alone was enough to push me forward. The first person I trusted wasn't family. Not this time. Because family, I had learned, could be complicated. I needed someone objective. Someone who dealt in facts, not emotions. So I made a call. Elizabeth? It's been a while. His voice was calm, steady, exactly what I needed. I know, I said. And I wish I were calling under different circumstances. There was a pause. Then his tone changed. What's going on? I took a breath and told him everything. Not dramatically, not emotionally, just facts. The lies, the isolation, the notebook, the forged documents, the applications. Silence followed, long enough to make most people uncomfortable. But I understood it. He was thinking,
Processing.
calculating. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, more serious. Elizabeth, you did the right thing calling me. I closed my eyes briefly. That was the first confirmation I needed. Not comfort. Validation. What you're describing, he continued, is not just concerning. It's strategic behavior. And if it continues unchecked, it could absolutely lead to legal action against you. I already knew that, but hearing it out loud made it real in a way nothing else had. I need to ask you something, he said. Go ahead. Do you feel safe right now? I looked around the room. The same room I had lived in for years. The same furniture. The same walls. But it didn't feel the same anymore. It felt staged. Controlled. Watched. I don't know, I answered honestly. Another pause. Then,
All right.
then we move carefully.
We.
That word mattered more than anything else, because now I wasn't alone in this. He gave me clear instructions. Simple.
Precise.
No unnecessary risk. Do not confront her yet. I won't. Do not change your behavior noticeably. I understand. And most importantly, start documenting everything. That last part settled deep, because suddenly the situation shifted. She wasn't the only one building a case anymore. After the call ended, I sat still for a moment, letting everything settle. Then I stood up.
And started.
The first thing I did was take photos. The notebook. The pages. Every single entry about me. I made sure the dates were visible. The handwriting clear.
No mistakes. No blur.
Because details matter. Then the folder. Applications. Signatures.
Notes.
I photographed everything.
Slowly. Carefully.
Like someone preserving evidence, not snooping. By the time I finished, my hands were steady, not shaking anymore. Because action removes fear. Not completely, but enough to function. The next step was riskier, but necessary. I needed external confirmation. Someone outside this house. Someone she couldn't control. So I made another call. This time to my doctor. Elizabeth, how are you feeling? He asked. Normal tone. Routine question. But now I heard it differently. I need to ask you something important, I said. Of course. Have you ever observed any signs of confusion or cognitive issues in me? There was no hesitation.
No.
None at all. Why would you ask that? Good. Very good. I may need that documented, I said. A pause. Then his voice became sharper. What's happening? I gave him a shorter version this time. Focused.
Direct.
Enough to understand the situation. Not enough to overwhelm. When I finished, he exhaled slowly. Elizabeth, I'm glad you reached out. That again. The same confirmation. Different person. Same reaction. I'll make sure your medical records clearly reflect your cognitive condition, he said. And if needed, I can provide a formal statement. That was more than I expected. And exactly what I needed. Because now, I had something she didn't. Professional validation. After the call, I sat back and allowed myself one small moment of relief. Not victory.
Not yet.
But progress. Real progress. But the most difficult part was still ahead. Acting normal. When she came home that evening, everything had to look the same.
No tensión. No suspición.
No change. Hey, she said, stepping inside.
Y replica calmly.
How was your day? Quiet. She nodded, watching me, always watching. But this time, I watched back. Dinner was almost surreal. We talked. Light topics. Weather. Small things. Completely ordinary. And yet beneath every word, there was something else. A silent game. Because now we were both performing. The difference was, I knew it. At one point, she smiled at me and said, "You seem better today." I held her gaze. I am. And I meant it. Just not in the way she thought. That night, I didn't lie awake in confusion. I didn't question my reality. I didn't replay her words. I planned. Because now I understood the timeline. She was building pressure. Gradually. Carefully. And soon she would escalate. Which meant I had one job. Be ready before she did. I looked at my phone one last time before turning off the light. Messages.
Contact.
Names I hadn't spoken to in weeks. Months. Some even longer. She had tried to shrink my world. Make it small. Manageable. Controllable. But she forgot something important. I built that world. Which means I can rebuild it. And this time, I will choose who stays in it. I closed my eyes. Not as someone trapped, but as someone preparing. Because the next move would decide everything. When someone builds a plan in secret, they rely on one thing more than anything else: timing. Not just what they do, but when they do it. And if you can see the timing, you can break the plan. By now, I could feel it. The shift. She was getting closer to something. More focused. More controlled. Less patient. It showed in small ways. The way she checked her phone more often. The way she watched me just a little longer than usual. The way her voice carried a quiet urgency beneath its usual softness. She was preparing for a move. Which meant I had to be ready before it happened. The opportunity came faster than I expected. 2 days later, she walked into the living room with a folder in her hands. Not hidden. Not secret. Presented. That alone told me everything. She was ready to move forward. "Elizabeth," she said gently, sitting across from me. "I've been thinking a lot about your situation." My situation. Not my health. Not my recovery. My situation. I nodded slowly. "All right." She placed the folder on the table between us and opened it. Inside were printed pages. Brochures. Photos. Clean, organized, convincing. "I found some wonderful places," she continued. "Communities where you'd have support, people around you, activities." Her voice was calm, measured, practiced. I looked down at the images. Smiling elderly people, bright rooms, warm lighting, carefully designed comfort. It was almost impressive, if you didn't look too closely. "And what exactly are these?" I asked. She smiled. "Options. Simple. Controlled. Neutral." But I could hear it. The direction. "For what?" I asked. "For you," she said softly. "To make sure you're safe." There it was. The word she had been building toward. Safe. Because safety justifies everything. Control. Restriction. Removal. All of it. I leaned back slightly. "And I'm not safe now." A pause. Just a fraction. But enough. "Well, you've had some moments," she said carefully.
Moments.
Interesting choice. "What kind of moments?" I asked. She hesitated. Then recovered. "You've been forgetful. A bit disoriented sometimes. It's completely normal after what you've been through." Normal. Convenient. Documented. Prepared. I held her gaze. "And who told you that?" She blinked. "What do you mean?" I said calmly. "Which doctor diagnosed me with confusion?" Silence. For the first time, real silence. She wasn't expecting resistance. Not like this. Not calm. Not precise. "Well, it's not about a diagnosis," she said quickly. "It's about observation.
Care.
Prevention." There it was again. Words designed to sound responsible, but empty underneath. I nodded slowly. "I see." And I did. Very clearly. She leaned forward slightly, sensing she needed to regain control. I've already spoken to a specialist, she added, just to evaluate things properly. Nothing serious. Specialist. There it was. The next step. When is that? I asked. Tomorrow, she said. Too quickly. Too prepared. I smiled. Of course it is. She watched me carefully now. Something in her expression had changed. Not concern. Not warmth. Calculation. Elizabeth, she said, her tone tightening just slightly, I'm trying to help you.
No.
She was trying to move me, and now I knew exactly when. Help me with what? I asked. With making the right decision, she replied. The right decision. Not my decision. The right one. Defined by her. I let the silence stretch. Because silence makes people reveal more than words ever could. Finally, I spoke. Let me ask you something. She nodded, cautious now. If I say no, what happens? That was the moment. The real one. The one everything had been leading to. She didn't answer immediately. Her fingers tightened slightly on the folder.
Her posture changed.
Subtle, but undeniable. This isn't about what you want, she said finally. And just like that, the mask slipped. Not completely, but enough. This is about what's necessary, she continued. You can't live alone like this.
Like this.
Again, undefined, but powerful. And who decides that? I asked quietly. Her eyes locked onto mine. I do, she said. There it was. Not concern, not care.
Authority.
The room felt different now. Heavier.
Sharper. Real.
I nodded slowly. Thank you, I said. She blinked. For what? For finally being honest. That unsettled her. I could see it. Because honesty wasn't part of her plan. I've always been honest, she said quickly.
No. Y replica calmly.
You've been careful. Silence again. But this time, it belonged to me. She stood up abruptly. I don't think you understand the situation, she said, her voice colder now. I looked up at her. Oh, I understand it perfectly.
And I did. Completely.
Every piece. Every step. Every intention. But she didn't know that. Not fully. Not yet. Tomorrow, she said firmly, we're going to that appointment. I nodded. All right. That answer surprised her. I could see it. Because she expected resistance. Emotion. Argument. But she didn't get any of that. Good, she said, regaining a bit of confidence. That's the right choice. I smiled slightly. Yes, I said. It is. Because tomorrow wasn't her move. It was mine. That night, I didn't feel fear. I didn't feel uncertainty. I felt something much more powerful.
Control.
Because she believed she was leading everything. Guiding the situation. Managing the outcome. But she had no idea that she was walking directly into the moment where everything would collapse. I closed my eyes slowly, already seeing it. The room, the people, the truth. And for the first time since this began, I wasn't reacting anymore. I was ahead. The morning felt different. Not tense. Not uncertain. Final. That's the only word that fits. Because some days don't feel like part of a story, they feel like the moment the story decides what it really is. And I already knew what this day would become. She was up early. More energetic than usual. Focused.
Precise.
Everything about her movements had that same controlled urgency I had been watching grow over the past days. She wasn't hiding it anymore. She was executing. We should leave in 30 minutes, she said while standing in the kitchen, already dressed, already prepared. I nodded calmly. I'll be ready.
No hesitation.
No resistance. Exactly what she wanted. And exactly what I needed her to believe. The drive was quiet, not peaceful, strategic. She kept glancing at me. Not obviously, but enough. Measuring. Evaluating. Watching for signs. Signs she had been writing about. Documenting. Building into her version of me. But today, I gave her nothing.
No confusión. No weakness.
No reaction. Just calm. When we arrived, I recognized the place immediately. Clean building. Neutral colors. Professional atmosphere. Everything designed to feel safe.
Trustworthy.
Authoritative. Perfect for what she was trying to do. Inside, the waiting room was quiet. And that's when I saw them.
2 people.
One I expected. One I didn't. The first was the specialist she had mentioned.
Composed.
Professional. Observing. The second was mine.
He stood up as soon as he saw me. Calm.
Confident. Prepared. Her step slowed. Just slightly. But enough. Elizabeth, he said warmly. Good to see you. I smiled. You too. She turned toward me, confusion flashing across her face. Who is that? I looked at her. And for the first time since everything began, I didn't hide anything. He's here for me. Silence. Not loud. Not dramatic. But heavy. What do you mean? She asked, her voice tightening. I said calmly that I thought it would be appropriate to have someone present since today is apparently about evaluating my ability to manage my life. The specialist shifted slightly, now paying closer attention.
Good.
That's not necessary, she said quickly. This is just a routine evaluation.
No. Irraplia.
It isn't. And just like that, everything changed. Because truth, when spoken at the right moment, doesn't need volume. It just needs precision. The specialist stepped forward. Perhaps we should all sit down and clarify the purpose of today's appointment.
Perfect.
We sat.
Not randomly.
Not casually. Position mattered. And I chose mine carefully. Across from them. Not beside her. That alone said more than words. My daughter, I began, calm and steady, has expressed concerns about my cognitive abilities and my capacity to live independently. The specialist nodded. That's correct. I'd like to address that directly. I continued. I reached into my bag.
Slowly.
Deliberately. And placed the first piece of evidence on the table. The medical statement. My primary physician, I said, has documented that I show no signs of cognitive decline, confusion, or impairment. The specialist picked it up.
Read.
Carefully. I didn't look at her. I looked at my daughter. And I saw it.
The shift.
The first crack.
Small.
But real. That doesn't mean, she started. I raised my hand slightly. Not aggressively. Just enough. I'm not finished. Silence. Then the second piece. Photos. Printed.
Clear.
Undeniable. The notebook. Her handwriting. Her words. The specialist leaned forward. Now fully engaged. These are notes, I said calmly, documenting behaviors that never occurred. I let that settle. Then the third. Applications.
Signed.
Forged.
Prepared.
For facilities I never agreed to, I added. The room changed. Not visibly, but unmistakably. Because now, this wasn't an evaluation. This was exposure. She shifted in her chair, her composure slipping. This is being taken out of context, she said quickly. I was just trying to build a case, I finished. Silence. Heavy. Final. The specialist leaned back slightly. Processing. Reevaluating. Exactly what I needed. My goal today, I continued, is not to argue. It's to clarify reality. I paused, then said it clearly. I am not confused. I am not incapable. And I am not giving up control of my life. Each sentence landed exactly where it needed to.
No emotion.
Just truth. The specialist nodded slowly. I see no reason to proceed with a cognitive evaluation under these circumstances. There it was. The moment. The collapse. She exhaled sharply. Elizabeth, you're misunderstanding everything. No, I said quietly. You underestimated me. And that was the real truth. Because that's where her entire plan failed. Not in execution. Not in detail. An assumption. She assumed I would notice, wouldn't question, wouldn't act. She assumed I would become the person she needed me to be. But I didn't. And now, she had nothing left. We stood up, not together, separately, different sides, different realities. Outside, the air felt different.
Clear.
Open.
Free. She followed me. Of course she did.
Please, she said, her voice no longer controlled. Just let me explain. I stopped.
Turned.
Looked at her. Really looked. And for the first time, I didn't see my daughter. I saw someone who tried to take everything from me. There's nothing to explain, I said. Then one final truth. You didn't protect me. You planned to replace me. Silence. Then I turned and walked away. Not slowly, not painfully, freely. Because in the end, this was never about proving something to her. It was about proving something to myself. That I was still here, still aware, still in control. And no one was going to take that from me again.